Hi everybody, it's Cray and I teach watercolor, and today we are doing our pine cones tutorial. Oh. We have Keenan here working the cameras.
Hello, and the bell.
And the bell, the most important part actually. And we will be doing, excuse me, we will be doing this project in 6 steps. So our very...
It's just the chair. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happening.
We're gonna do this project in 6 steps. So our very first step is we will put our background in and have some salt handy if you want to put in some salt texture. Our second step is we're gonna be putting the highlights on our pine cones. Our third step and our fourth step is we're gonna be working back and forth between the pine needles and then the darker, medium and darker values on our pine cone. So it's just kind of working back and forth depending on what area is what. Our fifth step is we will be putting in our snow, and then our very last step is any finishing details. I am using 4 paint brushes for this project. So our go-to brushes, which is round 2 and a round 6, and then I'm adding the round 12 and also the 1-inch wash. Now, we have literally hundreds of tutorials using just the round 2 and the round 6 brush. So if you don't know where to start with these 2 brushes, and then you can add the larger brushes as you go. Larger brushes are nice because you can fill in a larger area faster. So when we paint like full sheets of paper, especially with the background, you're gonna wanna use a larger brush because it just saves you a bunch of time. I am using 5 colors for this project. So our first color is red. Our second color is sea blue. Our third color is yellow ochre. Our fourth color is leaf green. And our last color is bleed proof white, which we will use for the snow, okay? I already transferred my outline onto my paper. We have directions in your welcome note for the Merry and Bright box on how to do that, or it's shown in like probably a couple hundred tutorials on our YouTube channel.
At least 7.
At least 7, for sure we know. So we can do our oath and then get to painting.
Sweet.
Okay, so if you can raise your right hand. And repeat after me. I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise not to compare my work.
I promise not to compare my work.
And I promise to have fun.
And I promise to have fun.
Thank you. And I love to start that way because that's what it's all about. It's just having fun, hanging out with me and Keenan.
Yeah.
And having a good time.
What's better than that?
I can't think of a
I will refuse to think of anything else.
Throw in some snacks though.
Yes, always.
So yeah, just remember that that's why you're here. Okay? Great. Cool. Let's start. Now, before we get to the pine cone area, I want to show you just like the rhythm, I guess, of how we're painting these pine cones. So if you think of pine cones, there's like each individual section that kind of comes out of its base, right? So we have like, you know, like these guys. So on your outline, we have like the tip that we see, and then it's connected to the center.
That's a guitar.
I don't know what's happening here. But what I'm trying to say is, as it comes out, let's say this is the middle of the pine cone. As all of these pieces come out, they are connected to your center, which means the closer it gets to the center, the darker your value is going to be. And then as it works its way to the front, it lightens. Okay? And this is going to be the lightest value because it's what's facing us. So on all of these little sections, there's going to be like a little tube. Okay? And then remember, your values are going to go from dark to medium. That smooth transition, and then this section is going to be your lightest value, okay? And we're basically just going to repeat that with our paint over and over again, and that is how we're going to get that sense of depth and dimension within our pine cone. Now, if you look at our reference photo, I want to call attention to 2 things. This pine cone, these little pieces, which I'm sure there's a name for that I totally could have looked up and I didn't do that, and I'm sorry. All of these are like really spread apart. You can see there's huge gaps in between them. And then there are some pine cones that where they're actually much closer together and they don't have such spreading happening between these little sections. So this is how we're approaching the first pine cone. The second pine cone, it's kind of more like, do you like my pine cone shape?
Yes, I do.
I'm a professional artist. We still have our highlights, but as you can see, they're much closer together, so we still get dark values in between, but we will not be able to see like the full like section. You know what I mean? Like basically, we're going to be using these medium and dark values to work in between these light values. Okay? I'm just doing this in drawing form so you guys can get an idea before we start painting. And there are even some pine cones, again, really talented, where they're so tight that you don't even see a lot of darker value in between. Those ones are more like, meh, meh, meh. You know, like just like the lines and the textures.
I have pine cone anatomy names.
Oh, great. Okay.
Okay, the center of it, where we can't really see, is called the central stem.
Central stem.
After that, sort of against the stem and woody seed scale is the seed.
Are these the seeds?
So, no, those are the woody seed scale.
Seed scale?
And remains of bract scale.
Seed scale?
Yeah, seed scale. They're just literally scales. Pinecone is the dragon of earth.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
I get it. So these pine cones, when they're tight like that, do look way more like scales, like reptile scales. See how they're tight like that? These ones, these scales are separated and kind of going out, and that's why we have so much room to do these value changes. And this one, the second one that we're painting, is kind of in between. So keep that in mind as we go into our pine cones. That will help you kind of figure out how to paint these, how to approach them. And of course, I'll be there to guide you, but I just wanted to give you a little sketch, give you some background. Okay, so I got my salt, I got my 1-inch wash, and I'm going to mix a desaturated blue. Now, the wonderful thing about this project is you can turn this background into like anything. And like our night tree one that we did earlier, you can totally turn this into a night scene, you know?
That would be sweet.
Just saying. Okay. But I wanted to do like that, like crisp blue, you know, like that kind of turquoisey color that we sometimes get with Christmas colors.
Yes.
Or holiday colors if you don't celebrate Christmas. And so I have here my sea blue, which is actually a very vibrant blue. And let's be honest, all of these colors are vibrant because they're liquid watercolors. And so if you want to tone down the vibrancy of this blue, you want to start adding other colors, especially ones that are across from the color wheel, because that will kind of like muddy the color up. So I'm going to grab a tiny bit of yellow ochre, which is going to make it more green, which is just a pretty color by itself. Let me move this closer.
Thank you.
And then a tiny bit of red. And I'm going to do that a couple more times just to create a muddier color. There we go. That. So now I have this like really pretty gray, green, blue. This would be a gorgeous paint color in your house. Just
a good shirt color too.
Yeah. Okay. So when I go to put this pink color into my pine cones, I want to try and avoid my pine cones. You can paint over your pine needles a little bit, but as you can see in the step-by-step here, which I'll just bring over really quick, the lightest value is right here, and then the pine cones are totally white. Okay, so just try and work around it. Let's go. 1-inch wash. This color, and I'm just going for it.
Speed.
And because we're putting salt, we're going to be putting in like snow. It doesn't have to be a very pretty, smooth, even wash. This can be a little bit messy.
Oh, good.
And for me, I like to always have like a slight value change in my background. I think it just kind of creates a sense of dimension without me having to do that much work. So I'm gonna make sure that the left-hand side and the bottom is a little bit darker value. And then I'm just gonna add water as I work my way up, and that naturally will create a lighter wash. You can overlap your pine cones a bit. Like, I don't want big white gaps in between. So just doing a light wash of overlap is just fine. I'm gonna do one more. Now, a little hint. I know that I said that if you want to do this a night scene, you can, but I want to call out that the reason why we can paint over these pine needles is because this blue is a pretty light value in general. If you were to do a really dark blue, it would be tricky to paint the pine needles over it. And I just want to call that out. So if you're painting like a really dark value, you got to try and paint around chunks of the pine needles in the snow, because if you paint on top of it, you won't be able to see it. And I'm feeling like I like my salt, but I want it to be a little bit darker. So I'm just gonna mix a little bit more color because I pretty much used all of it. And I'm just gonna do one more wash. Now, when you do a wash over after you put down salt, you're kind of washing away all your salt texture, which is a bummer, but I'm doing it anyway. And I'm just gonna paint over the salt. I'm not gonna swipe it off. I'm just gonna be a little bit, I don't know, messy?
Messy.
Messy.
Maybe rough?
Rough, a little bit. I like to call it edgy. I like to call it being a rebel. I like to call it breaking the rules.
Yes. We support all those things when it comes to the art world.
That's right. Actually, I was making chocolate chip cookies last night with my daughter, and I put in like double the amount of chocolate chips, and I was just like, let's just double it. I'm feeling kind of edgy, and Luna's like, what does that mean? It's like, it means I break the rules.
Get with it.
Yeah, she was like, what? Well, okay. But she wasn't mad because like more chocolate chips, you know?
Yeah, no, agreed. Also, did any of those make it to the office?
Nope.
Well, okay.
Sorry, Keenan.
Oh, yeah, it's fine.
Okay, I like that darker better. And then let's see if the salt, sometimes like if I put salt and then wash it out and then put salt on top, sometimes the new salt will show up and sometimes it won't, but I figure might as well add it, might as well try. Okay. Gosh, I love the color that I got on that.
I do too. There's actually a lot of colors on the table right now that I'm loving.
Yeah?
Not just on the painting, just everywhere.
Also, look at this cool bleed.
I know. I know. That's what I'm saying. There's just a combo of colors right now that are awesome.
Okay, so now what we are going to do is we are going to use our round 6 and we're going to put in our highlights on our pine cones. And I'm just going to use yellow ochre for that. So I have my 6. I'm going to grab some yellow ochre. And then I'm going to leave the edges. I'm not going to paint those yet because there's a good chance these are still wet and I do not want the yellow ochre bleeding. So I'm going to start from the center. And we're just gonna it's always a better idea to try, sorry, too many thoughts at once. To go the lightest value that you can go because you can always add more color and we wanna make sure that these are very clearly the highlight of our pine cones. So make sure that you're mixing water in with your paint to make it a lighter value. This color does read like yellow green. So sometimes to warm it up, to give it a little more hint of brown, like a light brown, you can mix a tiny bit of red into your yellow color mixture, your yellow ochre, and then put that in there. And you guys can see that color difference right there. That's reading like yellow green. This is like orange. See it?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
I was writing down an idea. I apologize. I can't tell you.
Okay. Can't tell you what it is. It's a secret.
It's a secret.
Does it involve you pushing me really, really hard without me being aware?
No.
Have you guys seen that video?
I have. Several times.
Look, my salt. My salt.
It came
worked.
back.
It came back. Look
Thank
how
you,
cool.
Salt. Whoa, that bottom corner is crazy.
Yes, crazy. And I'm running into little chunks of salt on my pine cones. Now, after my painting is dry, I'll wipe the salt off. So for now, I'm just dealing with it. I don't know if that's bad for your brushes. Can I just be honest with you? I don't know. I wouldn't think so. I mean, it's salt. Just like rinse your brushes when you're done.
Yeah.
But just saying. Don't actually know. Want to call attention to that. Now on this right hand one, I tried to outline all the different sections, but as I was like transferring, ooh, that got really dark. That happens, just kind of pick it up. As I was transferring the outline, add some more light value sections, like when there's large gaps. And you might be like, well, what shape do I do? Well, as you can see, these shapes are all funky circles. They're blobs pretty much. So just add a blob wherever you see like a chunk that's missing.
That could be small, medium, or large.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Nice.
Like especially like when they get closer to the top on this one, they get closer together. So at the top, that's where it kind of like gets tighter and then it loosens just a little bit. So I'm gonna throw in some couple. And the nice thing with like just doing extra highlights is they're there just in case. So if it comes to be where you're just like, I actually don't want a highlighted section there, you can just paint over it with a medium value or a dark value and it's gone. So for me, I kind of operate of like, let's be safe and just like throw in some extra ones.
Yeah, that's convenient.
And then as we go and add more shadows, we can decide about what ones we want to keep. Boop, boop. And I'm just kind of checking and making sure that I got my highlights. There is like a really big chunk right here there's nothing there. You can add one if you want, but that's actually pretty true from the painting. So I think that's fine. Oh, maybe a little guy right here. Now I'm gonna try and lift a little bit of this blue background color on the areas that I overlapped a little bit. So I'm just gonna take clean water and where there's that highlighted chunk, I'm just going to put the water there. See if I can lift a little here. Let it sit for a second and then take a paper towel and blot. Sometimes it picks up a good amount of color. Sometimes it doesn't pick up that much. And we just roll with the punches.
Just like the salt.
That's right.
You never know if it's going to show back up.
Yeah. Are you going to work for me today? I don't know. All right. Okay. So that was step 2. Now we're going to move on to step 3 and 4, which is going to be the majority of us doing this painting. So this is where we're going to put in our pine needles and also the different values on our pine cones. I'm going to start with the pine needles because this area is wet. I want to give my highlights plenty of time to dry because I want those to stay sharp. And let's wipe some of this salt off. So the danger of wiping salt off, especially if your painting is not dry, is it's possible that you smear your painting, and you can see that's happening a little bit right there. But because I know that I'm going to be adding snow, I'm okay with a little bit of smearing. If you're not okay with any smearing, then you can take a heat gun tool or just let this air dry for a long time, longer than you probably need, and then you can wipe it off. Someone will clean that up.
Yes. Someone will.
Someone will. Okay. Great. So you can use your 2 or your 6. It depends on how comfortable you are getting thin lines. I'm going to start with my 6. Let's just see how it goes. And if I feel like my pine needles are too thick, I'll move to my 2. And I have my green here, but I also have my yellow and I also have my blue. And I love mixing in between all of those colors to get different greens. I don't want all of my pine needles greens to be the same exact color. I feel like when you have variation in there, it just is more interesting, probably more true.
They talk to each other.
Yes, yes.
I've heard that. I've heard that recently.
You've heard that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have just my green, and then I mix some of my green with my blue, and then I mix some of my green with my yellow ochre, and so now I have a bunch of different greens that I can pull from. I also am going to mix a dark desaturated green. How I'm going to do that is I'm going to swoop some green over here, get some blue, and let's add a little red, and let's just see what that does. Oh, look at that, a gorgeous dark green.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Okay. So now I have all these wonderful colors that I can choose from as I add needles. There's no rhyme or reason to which colors go where. I'm just going to go for it, okay? So let's start over here. I'm trying to decide if I want to put my stem in first.
What would be the benefit?
The benefit of putting a stem in first is it's like a guide, a structure for you to start off.
Can you do one for each? A different method for both pine cones, or?
No, because they're all on the same branch.
Can you try? I mean.
You can't even try.
Yeah, wow. Hello. I saw your earlier pine cones.
Now, the reason why I'm hesitating to do it first is because usually when we put a really dark brown branch in, when we paint green needles on top of it, it doesn't come across as on top. That dark brown branch is going to show through. And if you think about a pine needle branch and its 3-dimensionality, you don't actually see the whole branch all the way through. You actually just see sections of wherever there's a gap of pine needles, pretty much, right? And so that's why I'm hesitating to do it first. So if you are a beginner, you will probably want to do it first because then you know where the pine needles come out of. But for me, as someone who feels a little bit more confident not knowing and just being like, sure. I would prefer you guys to do it after, just because then you really are creating that sense of dimension of these pine needles are on top and the branch is behind it, and you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay,
no.
then I'm just going to
no.
go for it.
I want to be honest. No, I don't know what you're saying.
Well, you weren't paying attention.
I'm so sorry. I was writing a note. I have weird ideas coming to me, and I have to write them down.
Do they have to do with me?
Sorta.
Well, then I'm upset if they're not about me, Keenan. Pay attention.
They are about you. Yes.
Well, you're definitely not getting paid today.
Today.
All right. So I got my 6. I picked up some paint. Sometimes what I like to do to get a narrow point on my brushes, I actually sandwich it on my palette. So I'll press down one way and then flip it over and press it down the other way. It just creates a pinched tip. And then I just go for it. Now, I didn't trace all of the pine needles either because I want you guys to have some freedom. It's actually really tricky, like trying to trace thin lines. So I just did the outline as a guide for you, and then you guys can like add it and go crazy, you know? Just remember to grab the different colors. So far I have 3 different colors already, and I feel like that looks dope. And then if you're like, well, what direction do these pine needles come out of? So the ones like looking at different pictures, they kind of like come out in chunks, like they kind of have gathered. They're not evenly spaced, you know what I'm saying? And some of them, they're like wonky. You know what I mean? But the ones that are underneath tend to kind of swoop forward, and then these ones on top tend to be like, "Meow, meow, 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 meow." Okay? And that is the sound you have to make.
Because that's the sound pine cones make. They're very sophisticated.
They are.
They're the dragons of trees. And they sound like that.
And I'm just going to keep going.
Kind of looks like a pineapple right now.
It kind of does.
That's fun.
So I'm kind of like, I have the branch line in there, so that's kind of the guide that I'm using, but it's not all the way through. So you just kind of like, oops, that pine needle got a little crazy, but I'm sure that happens in nature, so I'm not mad about it.
Sometimes those pine needles will stab you.
Yeah.
There's some trees that are aggressive out there.
They're dragon trees, Keenan.
Yeah. Oh, it all makes sense now. They're protecting their treasure.
And I want to call attention to 2 spots. Where'd my outline go?
Is it on the back of your
Right here.
paper? Yep, there it is, called it.
This is a snow clump, and this is a snow clump. So I am avoiding this area with the pine needle. See how I started the pine needle up here?
Yep.
If you accidentally forget to do that, it's not a big deal because we do have bleed-proof white, which we can just like layer. Okay, I'm gonna give that a second, and then I'm gonna move on to my pine cone. And the reason why I don't want to fully flesh out the pine needles before I attempt my pine cones is the pine needles are on top of my pine cone. So I do need to have some of those green needles kind of go over into it. So I need to paint the pine cones and then do the needles on top, okay?
Okay.
So we need to mix a dark brown. So I'm gonna flip this around so we can mix some brown. And brown is essentially dark orange, so I'm gonna get some red. I'm gonna get some more yellow. It's a nice orange color. I'm gonna grab some sea blue. Now I have this nice dark brown. And then I'm gonna connect it to this. So now I have this kind of range here. And if this is reading too orange for you guys, you can just do another drop of yellow ochre and that will kind of, there you go. So now I got this range. And you guys can either start, I like to start at the darkest value and bring it forward, like lighten it up. Some people like to start at the light value and then darken as they go. I don't think that there's like a strong better. It's just whatever you want to do. So I'm just going to start at where I'm thinking like that is coming out of the central stem. And I added my dark, and then I'm just going to continue to pick up color and then add water as I get closer.
Would it be safe to say that lighter to dark is slightly easier? Because then you have the opportunity to like darken things up if you think something's not quite the right dimension. Might be easier to like deal with if you need to fix something.
Let's try it. So that one I did dark to light. This one I'll do light to dark.
But you have to break it to make it.
So there I started light. And then I'm going to add the next value.
Oh, that's a good value.
And you want to like, after you do like the light value and the next value, you want to like work the area in between where they meet so they transition nicely. I actually think the light to dark was a little bit easier. And then I want like an almost black too, because like where this is coming out of, it's gonna be dark, okay? And I just wanna call attention to like This was the one that I did with just yellow ochre with water. So see how yellow it is? So if it's too yellow, just give it a second. We'll go back and we'll address the highlighted areas and just do like a rough brush texture over those to kind of like make them make sense with the rest of everything that's going on. So don't let that throw you off too much, okay?
Sweet.
So let's just focus on honestly going through all these individual sections and doing little value changes.
Pine cones, that word makes me think of the show Friends, where Joey has kidney stones.
Yeah.
And the doctor comes in and he goes, "You have kidney stones?" And Joey's like, "Well, are you sure?" He's like, "Kidney stones." And the way he says it just gets stuck in my head. So I'm just in my head over here, pine cones.
Friends is always a great reference. I always appreciate a Friends reference.
There's so many life references you can use from Friends.
Okay, and the other thing that I want to call attention to is it might be a good idea to actually kind of pop around these and not do them right next to each other, because if they're right next to each other, you get a chance of like bleeding in between them, and we want to try and minimize that. That shadow was just reading black, so I lifted it up and added some more brown. What the other thing that's sometimes helpful is like you can do a little bit of an outline for each of these sections just to kind of like shape it.
Whoa, that was kind of crazy how it just changed completely.
Yeah, sometimes just doing a little boop, boop, boop. Now, at this point, you're like, there's no way this is going to turn into a pine cone. And I'm like, trust the process. Just keep going. Just keep going. Got to give your painting a chance to be something before you decide it's not, you know? And sometimes the areas are so tiny that we can't get as fleshed out in terms of value changes. So just do your best. The biggest thing is like the darkest value always is going to be the part that's closest to that central stem, and then it's going to transition out as it goes. That's the most important thing. Well, we're going to be here for a while, just so you guys know.
Great.
Go ahead and get comfy, because we got a lot of these little suckers to paint. And I'm kind of like, sometimes you can batch paint them, and by that I mean like if you can work quickly, you can do like the dark value shadow on a few sections and then move to the medium and then move to the light on like 3 different sections. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Kind of jump around.
Yeah. But if you don't work super quick, then it'll be hard to blend those together.
I would end up jumping around anyway, because I would look at individually like the different shapes, and then I would say, that one looks harder than this one. I'm going to do that one last. You know? Mm-hmm. Either way, you still have to paint it.
Yeah. Either way, it's getting done.
Yeah. And I like when you add those lines.
It's sometimes like, honestly, my art teacher would be a little bit mad at me for saying add a little bit of an outline, because outlines, because what they can do is they can flatten. But for me, if I'm I feel like they're a really quick, easy way to define shapes and different things within something. So I'm not totally opposed to outlines. I'm really not. But if you're going for like realism, then outlining is not something that you want to go for. Okay?
Got it.
I'm just going to throw that out there. But sometimes it's helpful for me just to like, because as you add all these like dark, medium, all these values and they blend together and you got these different shapes and chunky areas, it's easy to kind of get lost. And so sometimes just doing like a really light little outline helps me understand how things are connected to each other. Now the other thing that I want to call attention to is I'm leaving little white thin lines in between these different sections so they don't all bleed together, but they will not stay that way. I'll go back in and kind of like tighten those out and add more like darker values and stuff. This is just like our initial lay. So I just want to say we'll go back and address those, just not while it's all wet right now. Kind of just, and at this point it's looking funky, but also we're starting to see a little bit of shape, just a little bit. It's not to the point where we're like, oh yeah, it's a pine cone. We're not there yet. So if you're just like, this is weird, it's not looking like how I want it to, I'm right there with you. You got to stick with it. Okay,
Believe in it.
Believe in it.
Give the painting a chance.
Give the painting a chance. And just keep going and trust the process. And then as these ones come up here, we're just getting like darker, like dark values in between. It's nothing too detailed or crazy. Just kind of working around the highlighted sections. Just doing a couple outlining on some of them just to form some of them up. Now some of these, as I'm painting them in, I'm able to get like a good transition, and some of them they're just kind of evening out, and that's okay because I can go back in and always add darker values and like make that transition better. This is really just us like laying down the colors, laying down the sections, but we can always go back in and adjust. So I just want to call attention to that in case you're feeling frustrated that your value changes are not staying. Okay, we need to give our eyes a break from this before we keep touching it, or else we'll probably start to get mad. So then let's put some pine needles back up here. Switch around to my green. Just some more pine needles. And this is kind of why, I mean, I like to bring up paintings all at once, but sometimes just letting your eyes take a break from whatever it is that you're working on is so helpful. Like, because I was starting to get frustrated with that. And I was just like, you know what? I need to like take a visual break so I could come back to it with like a renewed sense of like, all right, we can do this, you know?
Much easier to do that sometimes.
Yeah. And so that's why I like to work around kind of like a dance for drying times, for just like letting my eyes take a break, for all these different reasons. But I'm not going to do the bottom ones yet. So you can see I'm having some curve around, I'm having some curve up, I'm having some curve down.
Cool.
Okay. I'm going to move to this section, and then I'm going to come back in here and we're going to do some work. Okay?
Work.
So I need to mix more brown. So I need to have red, yellow, ochre, and sea blue. So that's a good brown. And I like to mix a few different ones. Nice orange, and then let's do a dark brown. But we still want our dark brown to read brown.
That makes sense. Dark brown to read brown.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, now for this one, the rules are the same in the way that like there's like a tube that's connecting these little pieces, but we're not seeing it as much. So these ones, we don't have to worry that much about the value changes. So I'm just gonna go in there with a medium brown, and I'm gonna start working in between these sections with a medium value brown. And sometimes I like to put in the medium value and then just use water to kind of work my way around, like just spread the paint that's already there. You will automatically get a little bit of a lighter value when you do that, but sometimes I think that's okay. Just a slight value change without having to like go too crazy is good. And we'll go back and add more to this. This is just like our initial lay through. Lay through?
Lay through.
Lay through.
It's an off-brand of chips, actually. You've heard of Lays. These are lay through. Lay through Saturday, lay through Sunday.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, they tried to get on with the NFL for selling them to them, but I don't know how that.
And then the sections where they kind of overlap, you just want to do like a thin line in between.
Lay through. It's like a layup, but lazier.
Well, then I'm into that.
Sounds great.
Okay. All right,
That one almost looks golden, and that's cool.
Okay.
Yep, stretch it
Do a
out.
little stretch. Because we're going back into this main one. And this is where we're going to put in, well, I'm going to put in my darkest values and kind of like, because they kind of all blend together. Like I said, that they possibly might. So I'm going to go in and start like darkening it, which will then start to push things back and move things forward. So I'm going to take my really dark brown. I'm going to add a little bit of red to it because I want it to read, still have color. So I'm going to take this dark brown and I'm going to start at where I know it's going to be coming out of like that really dark. the central stem. And I'm just going to kind of repeat that. So I'm just putting in this like really dark shadow at where I believe. And sometimes you have to kind of like imagine it, right? You can look at your outline to help you be like, wait, where is this? But just think it's more like the central part, okay? And already, just by looking, adding those dark values, we're getting more dimension. You see that?
Yes. If you were to flip that upside down, do you think it would look like a skyscape?
Totally. Like coming out of a planet, you know, those buildings? Yes.
Yes.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Nice.
And then I'm just gonna softly, like just work the area a little bit out of where this dark value is. Not all the way to the foreground, but yeah, look at that dimension we're getting already. Pretty cool, huh?
Super cool. I've been watching it change as you've been painting.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed.
Well, actually, currently you're writing yourself a little note, so you are not doing.
It's because you gave me a good idea, Sarah.
I don't remember what I was saying.
What you actually don't know is Keenan plans all of these projects. That's why he's taking notes, where he's just like, I got to teach them how to do this. And then, because I'm the pretty face, obviously, he shows me how to teach all of this, and this is how we are here. That's what
I'm a
Keenan is
professionally trained chef as well as artist, and I use food ideas as painting concepts.
And I just combine them.
So I can't get too mad at him because he's planning January's box right now, right in front of me.
That's why I don't get paid. I get all of it through rewards of other ways, you know.
And sometimes what we can do too, if we're looking at like, I'm just calling them tubes. I know that that's not the right thing. But if I'm looking at a tube and the tube has lost its value change where it's just like all dark, what you can do is you can lift a little bit. So like this guy right here, I feel like it lost a little bit of its value. Tubular shape. So like right where I want it to be a little bit lighter, I can take a damp brush and lift. And sometimes just lifting that value out a little bit, instead of going darker with your values, you can lift and it will have that same effect of having a little bit of shape and dimension. Okay. And I'm going to say this out loud because I'm saying it in my mind, and it's important for you guys to know that everybody feels this. Just keep going. It's still looking wonky, but I know that it turns out okay. So it's just like, okay, let's just keep going.
I don't actually see wonky.
Really?
No, I don't. I see a different aged pine cone, I guess. I don't know. I still see the pine cone. Even the other one, it looks more golden and popcornish currently rather than wonky.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, that might just be me. I don't know. I've got 3 or 4 angles on it though, so.
I think this area is where it's a little bit easy for it to get wonky because of the sections where there is no edge. You know what I'm saying? So it's a little bit easy to get lost. So Okay, I feel good about the values that I added there. I need to give this a second to dry, and then I need to address these edges, the most highlighted part. We're gonna go and add a little bit of color and texture onto those, but I need to give these a second to dry, okay? But we're getting a little bit more shape out of these. So for this guy, we're gonna do the same thing of putting in our dark values. We put in our medium values, and now I'm gonna go in and kind of like throw in some dark. So I'm not covering up the whole area. I'm just putting in the darkest value to show that it keeps going, kind of thing. And at this point, with both of these pine cones, I need to acknowledge that the highlights are not talking to the mediums and the dark values. They feel disjointed. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. This feels disjointed from this. That's okay. We'll go back and we'll fix that. But this is what I mean when I'm talking about how your values need to relate to each other. This color and this value is so light compared to everything else that it feels really separated, but we'll go back and address those values and tone those down so then it feels like one form, okay? Okay. We're just not there yet, so give yourself a little bit of patience, a little bit, just know like we'll do it. We'll get there. There's just a lot that we got to do in this painting. So I'm kind of working my way in between these different sections. Introducing a really dark value on the areas where it's just like it keeps going, you know?
Into the darkness.
Yeah. Hello, darkness, my old friend.
I love that song.
Me too.
There's a more aggressive version of it. Mm-hmm. Can't remember who sings it. Has a very unique voice. I want to say it was Disturbed who sings it. But he has an amazing voice.
Really?
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Yep. Sound of Silence, Disturbed.
Disturbed. Alexa. I'm just kidding.
I was thinking the same thing.
Okay, I'm just adding that. Okay. Now I'm getting to a place where I need to address the highlighted sections of both of my pine cones. I'm glad that we left them so light because then we want some of those areas to have hints of that, but we don't want the whole section to be that because it feels so far away, like so separate from what's happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take like a really reddish brown, really celebrate the orange color, and using a dry brush technique, so I'm gonna dab it on my paper towel, I'm gonna do little swoops over these highlights. So I'm getting a little bit of texture on here. If you wanna shape it a little bit, you can. But we're just trying to tone down the highlights a little bit, but we still want a little bit of them showing, you know what I mean? Because like this is the lightest value, this is the section that is like sticking out, so it should pop. And sometimes just doing like a little brush dry texture stroke over these highlights is just what it needs to read as a little bit wooden and like have them relate to the rest of the painting. Does that feel better?
Yes.
Okay, there is, I feel like I'm looking at this and this gap feels so much larger on my painting than in the reference photo, and I'm trying to understand why. So I think what we can do there, if you're looking at some gaps that are just so much bigger than the reference photo, and it doesn't look like that I forgot to outline one, it just looks wonky. I'm gonna add one. I am going to add a little tube section here. So I'm gonna use just water and let that sit just for a second. Okay. And then I'm gonna go in with my 2. I'm not gonna touch that yet. The other areas, I'm gonna shape these. So this is where I'm gonna outline some of the sections and the tubes a little bit. So I'm trying to bring a little bit of shape and form back into my pine cone.
Pinecone.
And you just want to make sure that, okay, now I can lift this out. It's bleeding a little bit more than I want, but I can go back and fill it in. Okay, yeah, that feels so much better to me.
Wow.
And we have every right to do that. And I just want you to know that, like, because we're mixing colors, because we're adding values at different times, and because, like, it could blend differently, it could do all these things differently, you have the power as the artist, as the person painting this, to say, yeah, that needs another little section area, or actually mine doesn't. Like, that is completely up to you. And it can be really scary when you're first painting to, like, trust yourself to answer those questions, because we tend to trust people with more experience, right, to tell us what it needs, because sometimes we just don't know, or we can't really tell. But I think it's such a good practice for you guys to say, what does my painting need? How can I look at this with a critical eye? Not critical bad, critical in how to improve this. And that's hard to do. So I just want to say, like, good job, and just keep going if it's really tricky for you, okay?
That's a reason why the Facebook group is so nice. Because you can say, hey, I'm looking at this way, I think I'm getting in my own head. What do you guys think this needs?
Yes. It's actually like a really weird, how do I say this? Asking for feedback is tricky, because sometimes people think they're assuming that you're just like being too hard on yourself, which is totally possible. We are really hard on ourselves, and so sometimes we'll be like, this seems off, what does it need? And some people are like, it's perfect, you know. And that's so nice to hear, and I don't want to like say that that's bad, but also I think that there is a skill in us being able to separate ourselves from our work enough to not take anything personally, whether it is ways to improve it or whether it's the best thing in the world. You can just say, like, okay, but this area seems off, what do I need? And to a viewer, they could say, actually, there's nothing off with that. That's just as valid as someone who says, actually, this might need this. And that's the interesting thing about art, is, like, to someone coming at this, they could look at this and say, like, this looks awesome. Like, I wouldn't change anything. And there could be someone who comes to this and says, actually, these sections are looking super weird. I would do this, this, and this. And we can take both of those as opportunities to learn. And so, but I guess it's, like, kind of tricky to navigate how to take feedback. It's a tricky thing.
It really is.
Positive and negative. And so I just want to say, like, a lot of it, though, is based on trust, and a lot of it is based on assuming positive intent. So I don't know. Does that make sense how I say that?
No, yeah, it does. Because I think a lot of times we're unfair to ourselves. And another unfair move is to believe someone who doesn't know what they're talking about and is overly critical about what you're working on.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yes.
that's why I say, you know, the Facebook group is such a great place because everyone there is either in the same position and starting point or has seen some things and they're like, oh snap, I've seen the same thing and I know exactly what you're going through. Let me hook you up with some knowledge.
Yeah, and that's why I think the Facebook group is, like, sometimes, how do I say this? Because some people are going to have opinions about what you do no matter what. And isn't
Oh, yeah.
it, like, so heartbreaking when, like, someone you love is just like, what is that?
Yes.
You know, and you're just like, oh. And it's actually interesting because part of me, when people... You're gonna learn something about me. But sometimes when people who don't paint have strong opinions about what it is that I do paint, I get a little saucy.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Where I'm just like, well, go
Seems-
paint your own thing then.
Seems a little too close to the office, Sarah. You ask me for suggestions. I don't know how to respond now anymore.
No, I guess I mean, like, maybe this is more true to, like, maybe people having opinions on how I teach more than my art, where they're just like, well, you should have done this. And I'm just like, do you know how hard it is to teach a YouTube tutorial? Why don't you go ahead and make your own YouTube channel, teach your own things, and we can just live in our happy world of doing our own thing.
Right.
Why you gotta come yuck my yum? You know what I mean?
Yuck my yum.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm lifting a little bit of color out on some of these sections just to give it a little bit more dimension. Looking close up on this painting, it honestly looks kind of like a hot mess, but it's when you step back and you're like, oh, this is in some way creating a pine cone shape. It's not perfect. It's not without issues, but somebody coming up to this would look at this and say, oh yeah, that's a pine cone.
Totally. I mean, I've been looking at it this whole time saying that's a pine cone. Pine cone.
And if you want a little bit of richness in your highlights too, I mix together just an orange and sometimes just adding a little bit of orange on some of these highlighted sections. Not a lot because we don't want to mess with the values, but just like some warmth makes that feel a little bit more rich. And we're going to do the same thing on this. So I'm actually going to take that same orange color and I'm just going to add it over here. And I'm kind of doing that dry brush technique, letting it be a little bit rough. But I want to point out, I'm not doing like a nice, even, smooth wash. Do you hear how scratchy my brush is on the paper?
Mm-hmm. Is that the salt?
No, that is because my brush is so dry.
Oh. Man, I really like the color of this second pine cone.
It's nice, huh?
Yeah.
Get some more. If you want a more golden color, you definitely want to use more yellow ochre. That's how you get that. See, isn't it funny how just doing one little swoop
Yep.
of color brings it. And then what I'm doing now is at the top of these highlighted sections, I'm going to blend out some of that medium value just a little bit. Not across the whole thing, just along the top part. I'm trying to soften the transition, give a hint to value change without fully fleshing things out, and that automatically is going to create dimension. You see how that looks like it's popping out a little bit more? So just on the top half of these highlights. blending out. Just going to shape these here a little bit better. And this feels like it actually needs to be a little bit darker value in between here. Okay, that pine cone looks so good.
Seriously.
Love how that turned out. I think I'm actually going to add another little tube thing right here on my, see, this is the one that I added here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do another one right here. I just feel like that space seems too flat. So I'm just going to take a damp brush and wet the area. Now we do have bleed proof white too. So if you're trying to lift color out and it's just not doing what you want it to, you can utilize your bleed proof white to create a highlight. But just remember, as we've discussed in previous tutorials, or others' tutorials if this is the first one you're watching, bleed proof white is opaque. So there's going to be a new level of opacity introduced whenever you do bleed proof white. And that's not bad, I just want to call attention to it. I feel like I need to do one more on some of these areas, just a little darker. Yeah. I will say that this project is probably not as difficult as a metallic star, but it's hard. It's easy to get lost in the sauce, as we say here.
It's a great phrase. Ooh, metallic pine cones.
That would be so hard.
That would be tricky. We could call that the Midas touch.
Yeah. I'm letting just a little bit of light back in on some of this. And I think that's why I would consider something a little bit harder than not, is because it's not necessarily a clear step 1, step 2, step 3, medium, light value, medium value, dark value. Sometimes I put dark in and then sometimes I gotta lift it out, and sometimes, you know what I mean? And it's kind of like this back and forth, working it until it gets to a place that you feel good about. And it's difficult for me to say as I'm teaching this to you when I can't see your paper exactly what you need to do for yours. You know what I mean? So I just want to acknowledge that. That's why some projects are harder than others, because it's just like, wait, you're taking stuff out, you just put darker in, and it's like, yep, sometimes that's what you got to do. Sometimes that's just it, you know. Okay, I'm going to tighten this up a little bit, which by that I mean get rid of like the white spaces that I've left. I'm going to give that a second to breathe. And let's do some pine needles. Let's give ourselves a little bit of a pine cone break here. Grab some more green. And make sure that your pine needles are coming all the way to the edge of your paper. It doesn't matter where your outline was transferred. You need to have that come out of the side of your paper. And this is where I can start to paint over my pine cones a bit. The darker value needles are going to show up better. Let's try some with our two just to see the thinness that we can get, because I love me some thin lines. Boop. And you are gonna get some that are like wonky in shape. Pine needles are super wonky. You know?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And they're bendy.
Yeah. So let's put our branch in there now. I'm gonna use my 6. And if you don't have brown on your palette, just mix more brown. But we're not going for something super detailed. I'm just going to, like, wherever there are gaps. That's too red. There we go. Where there are gaps, just kind of introduce the branch. And so lift up your brush when you're coming across an area that's super pine needle-y, you know?
Pine needle-y.
Yeah, like here I lifted up my brush because I have a bunch of green pine needles, you know?
Okay. In case the branch is pine needle-y.
That's just where the pine needles are in front of the branch.
Oh, got it.
Yep, okay. What is this? A green dot.
Saved it.
Okay, I'm gonna give my pine cones a second before I go back and do finishing details, but they're looking
Real.
pretty real.
They're pretty
Those are
cool.
looking pretty three-dimensional.
Yep.
I'm gonna add some snow. So for my snow, I'm gonna use my 6 and my bleed proof white, and I kind of want to get a falling sensation. So, and because this is so close up, our snow flakes themselves are gonna be bigger. So I'm gonna flick. Those are not as big as I want them to be. So then I'm just gonna go in and draw.
Flick, dip, draw.
And then while these are wet, take a card and smear.
Boom. Look at that.
We're gonna do more. And you can, like, if you don't want to do the smearing technique, you can smear them yourself. You can just boop. But it's kind of fun. You just want to be careful with the smearing technique. If you're doing this over here, you don't want to smear your needles or anything, pine needles.
Freshly painted greens.
Yeah. So these ones I'll probably just kind of more dash. And then for my snow, I left this area nice and bare, but I'm gonna put bleed proof white in that area. And then on the bottom part, let a little bit of color bleed into it, because even snow, like when it's gathered, has a little bit of dimension to it. So there needs to be a little bit of a darker value underneath. So you can just smear the colors that are there to create that. And then the same thing over here. And if you want to, like, to continue the snow a little bit throughout, you can get it nice and thick.
That looks cool.
Doesn't it look like little? And like for me, this is looking really good, but I feel like I need a little bit of pine needle. I don't know why, but I feel like I need a little one coming out of here to break up the snow a little bit. If your snow is feeling too thick, just like bring the pine needle in a little bit more. Because we got to think about how that snow is actually sitting on that branch and how much would actually be accumulating and all of that stuff, you know? So you can play with that. And then I'm going to do more snow chunks. Maybe not as big. I want to kind of do different sizes. If you want your splatters to be bigger, then you can do two things. You can make sure you have a lot of paint and water on your brush that will just have allow you to have more paint to flick off, or you can use your round 12 brush. A larger brush will just automatically pick up more paint. I want it to be a little bit big though, so I'm really picking up a lot, and I'm getting paint everywhere.
And the paint's saying, I'm picking up what you're laying down.
I'm gonna try the 12. I wanna show you guys this. Ready?
Ready.
I can feel it.
You can?
It's like on my arm.
Oh, no.
It's okay if it gets in front of the pine cones too. Snow falls in front of pine cones. You can even like, if there's like, oh, I really want to cover that spot. Well, guess what? A big snowdrop.
Oh, that's convenient.
Yeah. So much of art is trying to figure out how to cover up stuff you don't like. Okay, that looks pretty awesome. I'm pretty thrilled with it. I'm just gonna tighten up that one area where I lifted the color out to add an extra little tube right here. I'm just gonna shape that a little bit more.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah. But I gotta rinse all my bleed-proof white off my brush. And for those who aren't as familiar with bleed-proof white is a watercolor. It's like a really thick gouache, pretty much. But you can use your watercolor brushes with it. Just rinse your brushes really good. Because it's thicker, it stays in your...
One thing that would help get that bleed-proof white out of your brush is that that suction cup brush puck thing that you can put in the bottom of your glass and jar.
The brush puck is awesome for cleaning your brushes while you're painting. Because it's just like this little rubber thing that you can like rub your bristles on.
Yeah. You can also stick it to your kids' foreheads. It's hilarious.
Just be like, come here.
Don't move.
And this is where we go, gall dang, we did it. There were moments.
There were weird moments.
There were weird, funky moments, but you know what? You gotta trust the process. You gotta just keep on going, and you gotta say, I know this looks really bad right now, but we're gonna pull through, and we're gonna do it together. That's how I was feeling a little bit, where I'm like, am I gonna pull this one through?
Wait, did I actually paint this one?
Wait.
Was this my project?
Keenan actually, we paused the cameras. Keenan came in and fixed everything for me.
It's camera magic.
Thanks, Keenan.
You're welcome.
And now we have this beautiful pine cone painting.
Lovely.
Love how it turned out. So fun. And I'm sure that some of you feel great, and I'm sure that some of you are like, I don't know about this. I don't know about these pine cones, and that's okay. There are going to be some projects that you resonate with, and you're just like, yeah, I did that thing. And there are going to be some other ones where you're like, I don't know about that. And then there are going to be some times where you're just going to walk away super frustrated, and you're going to think it turned out horrible. And then you're going to come back to it the next day and be like, oh, wait a second. Did I paint that? Well, hello. And that is what we call the watercolor fairies.
Yes.
They come during the night. They're our friends.
They're so nice.
They're so great. So all of that is to say, if you're finishing a long painting session and you're feeling frustrated, before you rip it off and rip it up and throw it in the trash, come back to it the next day and see if the watercolor fairies did their magic. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for hanging in there with me and painting this guy. I love how it turned out. I think it's beautiful. And I can't wait to see how yours turns out. We mixed colors, we had salt, we did a bunch of different funky stuff with our pine cones, so everybody's is gonna be a little bit different. And also you can take, like we approached pine cones 2 different ways here, and if there is one that was easier for you, make both of them that way and say like, forget this tubey one, I'm gonna do 2 tight ones, or forget this tight one, I'm gonna do 2 really tubey ones. Like, make it yours. You have the permission and now the knowledge to do so. So I can't wait to see how it turns out. If you're on Facebook, you can tag us. If you're on Facebook, you can join our watercolor group. That's called Let's Make Art Watercolor. It's the one we were talking about today, where it's a wonderful place to share your work because it's people who are experiencing what you are experiencing. And it's so much easier to do something when you know that you're not alone, and you are not alone on your watercolor journey. We're here for you. And if you're on Instagram, you can tag us at Let's Go Make Art or hashtag Let's Make Art or hashtag Let's Make Art Watercolor.
Or
so many. What?
to save on postage,
Order.
they're in the description.
That's right. And you can get any of this at letsmakeart.com. Keenan, thank you for all of your art knowledge and really coming up with all of these projects.
All the originals I painted are behind you, so you're welcome. Thank you.
If you want to see Keenan's work, it's here. And I can't wait to see what you were planning for January and all those little Post-it notes that you have.
Through August. So
They're food. That's what we're painting. Food.
and eating. I don't know which one's better, really.
All right. Thanks, you guys, for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time. Bye.